We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison. Headliners is up next, but first our top stories this evening. The Met Police is set to speak to Channel 4 and the Sunday Times after claims of rape and sexual assault were made against the comedian Russell Brand. Now, a warning for those of you watching on television, the following footage contains flashing images. The Force says it's aware of media reports of a series of allegations and urged anyone who believes they've been a victim of sexual assault to get in touch. It comes as the BBC, Channel 4 and the production company behind shows hosted by Brand launched their own urgent reviews. A warning some people may find the following content distressing.
He was like, so how many people have you had sex with? And I said, no one. Like, I've never had sex with anyone. And he got an erection straight away. And he was like, oh my God, he's like, my baby, and picked me up and cradled me in his arms like a child and was stroking my hair. And he's like, you're like my little dolly. Russell engaged in the behaviours of a groomer. Looking back on it, I didn't even know what that was then or what that looked like. He would try to drive a wedge between me and my parents, taught me to lie to them.
Well, Russell Brand denies any criminality and insists that all of his relationships have been consensual. Media lawyer Jonathan Code told us it's crucial that these allegations are examined.
Good reporting outfits like you must be allowed to make allegations and say some hard things. We only have to think very far back. Hugh Edwards, Kevin Spacey, both were the subject of huge media assaults, and both, it turns out, are innocent. So these are very, very difficult questions as to the protection of people's reputation on one hand and the right of free speech on another.
Liz Truss will urge the government to cut taxes and reduce spending on welfare in an upcoming speech. Speaking at the Institute for Government, the former PM will also call on Rishi Sunak to raise the retirement age and ditch some green commitments. The comments come just 1 year after her mini-budget. Ms Truss resigned last October after her tax cuts sparked an economic crisis. And Sir Keir Starmer says he'll seek a, quote, much better Brexit deal if Labour wins the next election. The party leader told the Financial Times he tried to negotiate a closer trading relationship with the European Union. Labour has ruled out rejoining the customs union or the single market. However, the trade and cooperation agreement negotiated under Boris Johnson's premiership will be up for review in 2025. This is GB News across the UK on television, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Time now for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, the show where comedians talk about tomorrow's top news stories. I'm joined by the Ross and Rachel of GB News. It's Lewis Schaefer and Paul Cox. Will they, won't they? Spoiler alert, they won't.
But they have.
Oh, they have? Oh, that's not a mental image I was... No. I'm presuming you spent all day looking forward to working with each other?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to make a formal complaint about him in about 15 years, but that he demanded that
kissed me.
15.
You know what? I've reviewed the tape, and I don't remember that.
You'll be doing that from the home. Nice. Right, let's move on to Monday's front pages. The Daily Mail, Let Be may have murdered 3 more babies is their headline. The Guardian, Unite launches red wall push for more radical Labour policies. The Financial Times, Labour government would seek to rewrite Brexit deal, Starmer pledges. The iNews says an open secret. Russell Brand broadcasters face questions over failures. The Telegraph, BBC forces into urgent inquiry over Brand. And Daily Star, Britain on the lash. And those were your front pages. We need to find out more about this. First up, we go to the Mirror. Lewis, what have they got?
They have What Did TV Chiefs Know? And it's about Russell Brand, who I know slightly or met. Okay, slightly. And it says BBC and C4 to probe rape and assault scandal. I don't know what to say about this. I was thinking, what should I say? I was thinking, what would Russell Brand say about any of us if a situation, what would he say about himself if it wasn't him that was accused of this? And I thought to myself, well, he would say, keep your mouth shut to keep your job.
What would he say about himself if it wasn't him accused? Nothing, because then he'd be...
No, not him. But what would he say? What would he say?
Can someone get me a flip chart?
Do you know what? Here's the problem. The problem is, there's no way... It's a horrible situation. There might be... I can't even say there might be truth, because the way things are, we believe the victims.
You can see the front page does it exactly the way that journalists have to. The headline is a question.
Yeah.
The article doesn't answer any of the questions.
Yeah.
That's how you get away with it. You ask the question
Which is wrong. And I want to say...
You don't know the answer at the moment.
And I want to say this, because I do know the answer. I know this is what I know. I know this.
You don't know
Channel 4 is state-owned media, and the BBC is state-owned media, and the Times is Rupert Murdoch. And everybody who's watched me on this show knows that whatever the story, you have to presume that the press, if you call the BBC the press or Channel 4 the press, they're lying.
But isn't the problem with that, though? What you've done there is you've done the platform version of an ad hominem argument. So instead of engaging with the point, is there something... Do these bosses need to answer questions? You've just gone, oh, it's on the BBC, therefore I just ignore it. Then you're just not playing the game rather
No, they don't need to answer questions until Russell Brand has been found guilty. And then they need to. Right now, it's all speculation. It's some kind of piece that was on it. You know, people have watched that and they've come to differing opinions. And so what I'm saying is, no, they don't need to answer any questions until... you know what? And who cares if they answer any questions? They don't deserve to be in business. The state should not own media.
We can ad hominem again. Let's get back to the point. And because there were people who've made claims. Now they're anonymous victims.
Yeah.
But you are effectively calling them liars as well by saying it's on the BBC, therefore it can't be true. Therefore you're implying everything these people have said is false.
What I'm saying is not that.
Okay.
I am saying...
What would you say about it if it weren't you, but it also was you?
If I said this is what I would say. This is what I would say. I would say that I am in so far over my head in this show. I am a failed minor comedian from another country, and I'm like suddenly involved in this thing which is so important to so many people, and you are probing me for the truth.
I'm just annoyed because I had 20 quid on a sweepstake that you'd talk about sugars by now, and you've not done. And so somehow you didn't get into this story.
Well, you want to know something? I work with a guy. The guy's a vegan, and he seemed very stressed out, and he's been a vegan for a very long time.
Paul, back to the story. It's about, are there questions that the media organisations, some of which are the people who broke this, are like Channel 4, put dispatches on, and then were like, ooh, it's us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting from that perspective that he was the darling. He was the darling of Channel 4, let's not forget. He was the darling of The Guardian. He was the pin-up boy. And, you know, arguably the BBC he was the darling for them as well. So it's very difficult for them, but it's a very difficult watch all round. The thing I took away from the documentary myself was a couple of things that I found very interesting, actually. I think the way that they edited and produced the documentary portrayed women in a sort of weak and helpless way without any autonomy. And if they were put in front of an attractive man, they lost all will. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that of these women. I hope all of the people involved in this well. I wish them well, shall I say. There needs to be a full police investigation.
Right, let's move on to the Telegraph. Have they got more for us, Paul?
Well, the Telegraph are talking about the NHS. So the NHS creates hundreds of woke jobs despite crackdown. So this is the NHS are planning to spend millions, they say, in the Telegraph, creating woke diversity and inclusion jobs. And I always find this particularly fascinating. Of course, on our channel and from people in general, in the general public, this is an easy reason to kick the NHS. The NHS is on its knees. They don't have money anyway. There are huge problems with the NHS. And the last thing we really want to hear is they're going to spend money on jobs like this, because most of us don't see where the value is in that. The reason I say that is because I do understand that there is a need to be able to be educated to a point that you can understand cultural differences in some patients. But at the end of the day, when a triage nurse is looking at a group of patients within A&E, they are not basing their decision on their skin colour, their sexuality, their religion, the demographical cultural issues. They are basing it purely on what they see in front of them, which is ill people. And I think that's where the money needs to go, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, you just focused on triage, where obviously it's all about panic and there's blood everywhere. But what about things to do with oxygen levels? Well, just last year there was a minor scandal about the fact that the things that measure how oxygenated your blood are work for white skin.
Right.
And that's where the research stopped, so they're not really good for it. So maybe there's some reason to spend money, but Lewis is making a good point, isn't it? We know they don't have any money, and wouldn't we love that money to make the waiting list shorter?
Of course we would. The problem is that we all could act to make the waiting list shorter by being healthy, and that involves eating no carbs and an all-meat diet with lots of eggs. So, I mean, whenever I see a story like this, you feel for the NHS. The NHS is meaning well, but they're not doing what's necessary to cure the people. We can cure ourselves, the nation should cure itself, the NHS should help us, but they're not helping.
No, I think you're right. Eggs and all-meat diet will definitely stop you having that car crash. What about The Guardian, Lewis? What have they got for us?
The Guardian, Unite launches a red wall push for more radical Labour policies, and this is in The Guardian. I read the article, believe it or not. I know it's hard to believe, but and basically it said that Unite, who gives money to the Labour Party, so the Labour Party is their boys, is basically, it makes it seem like they're fighting for more a left-wing agenda, whereas Keir Starmer seems to be focusing on just getting elected. He's all pedal to the metal. We got to get elected, whatever it takes, even if it means going along with Brexit, whatever it means, we got to get elected. And so the article makes it seem like they're saying, hey, let's be more left in these policies. But the policy that the United wants is for more oil drilling in the North Sea. Did you read that as well?
Yeah, which
isn't quite left.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit confused.
And Paul, this is actually money that they were saying instead of spending it with Labour, they're trying to spend it directly to try and raise some backing to these causes.
Yeah, of course, and it's going to be a fascinating 4 or 5 years coming up, because we're going to see once again the infighting of the Labour Party. There's more factions within the Labour Party than there is in any other party, because they're a very, very broad church. They talk about the Red Wall here, which I always find fascinating. The Red Wall really is working class Britain. The type of people that are union members, the type of people that rely on the union, they're fiscally socialist. They're not culturally socialist. So if you were to speak to these people, they probably, and I hate to do this stereotype, they probably voted Brexit. Their concerns financially are that they don't earn so much. They're on the lower end of the demographic, and the reason that they are fiscally socialist is that they want some of that wealth that's out there shared around. But when it comes to things like cultural and everyday policies, they're much more conservative than most conservatives are these days, because they don't understand. You know, they would like to see immigration culled in some way because they see it impacting on them. They would like to see Well, I'm just trying to think without getting myself in hot water here.
Yeah, I was going to say, already starting with they don't understand was a bit... We understand. I'm from Manchester.
No, I don't understand. I consider myself from the Red Wall, right? I don't live geographically in the Red Wall, but I consider myself from it.
Let's just go a little look at this. We need some levity after all that. To the Daily Star, Paul, what have they got?
Yeah, fascinating. Britain on the lash. So why does it always rain on us, the Star asks? And Hurricane Lee is on its way to batter Britain with 60-mile-an-hour winds. Basically, autumn's on the way.
That's it, isn't it?
That's what's happening here. Hurricane Lee, by the way, the vast majority of Lees I have met were on the council estate or grew up on, so it's going to be pretty dangerous.
OK, we've got ahead. That's it for part one. Who'd have thought we'd get some weather? But still to come, we'll have a go at the EU, we'll have a go at China and young people. That is right up your street. We'll see you soon.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Stephen Allen, helped tonight by comedians Louis Schaefer and Paul Cox, who, fun fact, first met on Tinder. The Guardian, Paul, from... we just got to jump straight to the next one. It's a story about attracting young people. I daren't do the full actual intro I was going to do. We'll all get sued. This is more of a political one.
It is very much. Senior Tories warn, if we can't offer policies to win over young, we're sunk. So... they're sunk, Steve, is what I would say, because it's, you know, the whole point of this article in the Guardian suggests that the Tories can't rely on people becoming more conservative as they grow older. I think they probably can, and the reason I say that is because I've never met I met very few people that were young conservatives growing up, and the ones that I did meet were odd. Yeah. And, you know, and there's good reason for that. Why would you be conservative when you're an idealistic young person? The last thing you want to be is conservative when you're a 15 or 16-year-old joining the world. You want the whole world to share and be nice to one another. Then you realise that's never going to happen, and you want to hold on to all the money that you've got.
Lewis, I mean, they say that they're sunk, but I mean, Paul makes a good point. Young people, not only they tend to lean left, they also tend to not vote, and old people tend to vote. It's a strategy that's always worked.
And it's also, if you're going to offer the under-30s the same policies that Labour has, what's the point of being another party? And that's what this guy, this Tom Tugendhat, he was the same. He's like the minister of something, and he's the same guy who was letting in the Chinese communist, supposedly spy into the House of Parliament. There's that old story, Paul. The old joke is to be young and a conservative is to have no heart. To be old and left is to have no brain. Do you know that? There's an actual...
The first time I heard it, it wasn't quite delivered like that. It was delivered with someone...
Can you make it better, Steve? You're Mr. Know-It-All.
I don't think I want to. I quite enjoyed that.
But was I basically right?
And... Yeah.
If you...
Yes. No, the point is that I think Paul made the point. It's realism hits you, doesn't it? It slaps you across the face.
Yeah.
And you tend to get more right-wing as you get older. It's linked to ear hair.
Yeah.
No one really knows.
Can I just put a line under this? Is that when the Tories start talking about doing Labour policies, they have no place being in business. And that's why there needs to be a split in the Tory party to get rid of all of those people.
On to the Times, Paul, and if you don't like the EU, but you also don't like illegal immigration, hard to pick a side in this fight.
Oh, crikey. Yeah, this is the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. Illegal immigration surge puts future of the EU at stake. She makes a really good point here. I mean, the future of the European Union is at stake, she says, unless it can stop a huge surge in uncontrolled migration across the Mediterranean, the Italian Prime Minister said. Now, we think we have it bad on the English Channel, and it's not ideal. But what they suffered last week, I think the island was called Lampedusa, and they basically had an influx of 8,500 illegal immigrants come across on boats to an island that's idyllic holiday island, populated by 6,000 people. So there was sort of 1.5 times, 150% of the population entered the island illegally via the boats. And she's making a point which I think most people on either side of the argument can agree with. It's not sustainable. What are we supposed to do? Where do we start to stop this? And I think eventually you have to negotiate some pretty draconian things alongside perhaps safe passages. However, you're going to have to stop it. And at some point, whether it's the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, people on the left or right, they're all going to have to do the same thing. And that is some pretty strong measures to slow this process down.
Lewis, is it linked to carbohydrates?
Yes, in a way. In a way, the more carbs that people eat, the more mental they become, and the more weak they become, so they're not able to fight off this kind of thing. What's being proposed is Meloni wants the EU to accelerate giving 785 million euros to Tunisia to stop. We're paying Tunisia to keep the people there. It's like instead of paying people to be like, let's say they're captives and we're buying them out of captivity, we're paying money to keep them in sort of captivity. So people have to fight. I don't know, they're not fighting for their country.
The EU's meant to be able to redistribute, isn't it? So that not one country, one border country has the problem of dealing with those kind of numbers.
Yeah.
The EU doesn't play ball with itself in terms of distributing people around.
But why should they have to distribute people? The people shouldn't be allowed into the country.
You're doing it ideal, though, but when you are faced with a situation that's not ideal.
Let's also remember, just for context, there is legal immigration in the sense that there are people fleeing certain conditions, and we agree globally that they should be able to do so. This isn't the problem that we're facing. There's kind of this economic immigration now where people are going, this is what we want to do, this is where we want to go.
And we'll be allowed.
To the Telegraph, Lewis, take us to a walk there. If you don't like the World Health Organization, but you don't like China, it's hard to pick a side in this fight.
Yes, it's hard for me to even read this because China pressed to allow new COVID origin probe, and this is coming from the World Health Organization, which I thought was in like the back pocket of China.
Were you wrong then?
I don't. You know what? The lines are changing. The guy who's proposing it, this Tedros, he's the head of whatever the World I can't pronounce his name, Ghebreyesus or whatever. You know this, Steve.
I don't know it. Yeah, I mean, are you waiting for Steve to save you?
I know, because he knows.
I made a pledge to myself to not try it.
Steve always thinks he's always hyper prepared. And he is hyper prepared.
You know he's there, don't you?
I don't like him. I don't like him.
I'm not sure he does know.
No, he's like the goody two-shoes teacher who's like, oh, aren't I better than everybody
back to
else?
this story then.
Anyway, the fact is that this guy, who's the head of the World Health, last week admitted that he hadn't been vaccinated himself, and he was pushing the vaccine. So you can't believe anything. Personally, this implies that COVID might not have been a thing.
So this story is about actually finding out more information about its source. That's the story, rather than the other stories we're bringing to it. Paul, do you think this is a good... Is this a step in the right direction? Are we flogging a dead horse trying to find out?
No, I'll tell you what I think. I think that the WHO, of all people, amongst these global organisations, should be transparent. There's no reason why they shouldn't. And they should welcome the probe. Why would they not be interested in the probe, is my question over this, because it could help understand a whole bunch of things.
They are pushing the probe.
What?
Yeah, no.
The WHO is pushing that. You're misreading it.
Am I?
Yeah. China is pressed. The WHO is pressing China, according to this article.
Oh, sorry, I see the WHO and China as exactly the same people.
Well, they used to be, in a way.
To him earlier,
yes. Where's my red meat? But my point again, OK, let's transpose WHO for China. They should be welcoming it anyway. Why wouldn't they welcome it? My point remains the same.
Yeah, and just for reasons of balance, and also this sentence, COVID was a thing. I think I have to say that every single time you're on, because you've got a tattoo that disproves.
It says COVID is not a thing.
The Times next, and this is a spy that I don't think James Bond would seduce, Paul.
No, that's a good point. Well, I don't know. A 2023 James Bond may well be forced to seduce this type of spy. Security fears. A Chinese spy, in inverted commas, spent 18 months in Commons. Now, regular followers of this show and the news will know this has been going on for a couple of weeks now. A British parliamentary researcher arrested on suspicion of spying for China was able to access the Palace of Westminster for up to 18 months without any security vetting. And this is because he knew certain people within the Tory party, which for whatever reason seem to allow him to bypass the system. This fascinates me because in the past I've had a real job, and I was once for many years security cleared and in security cleared jobs, and this is no process that's without its rigour. It's extremely rigorous. So the fact that this guy was able just to wander around the Palace of Westminster, freely accessing the sort of things that he would have been able to pass on to China, absolutely bamboozles me. I can't understand how it could possibly happen.
Do you think it's a little bit of posh boy goes to posh school, and all of a sudden we all go, oh no, let's let them through? Lewis, you're an outsider, so you won't feel our natural affinity to just go, oh, yes sir, to posh people.
Yeah, no, I could believe it. And the guy who was bringing him in on a daily basis without getting him a pass was that guy, Tom Tugendhat, who's the security minister, who's the guy who's proposing basically communist left-wing proposals. So he's in, I'm not saying he's in bed with, I don't know what the story, whether it's true or not, but this guy who's the security minister is involved with supposedly a Chinese spy while advocating extremely left-wing proposals.
What's the left-wing proposal he's advocating?
He was advocating what was the thing in the thing? Hold on a second. Hold on. He was advocating the Tories can't win unless they advocate.
Appeal to young people is the incredibly left-wing.
It was about net zero, and it was about all the other things. He says
they didn't used to be left-wing. They were a blue-green Tory David Cameron proposal.
Whatever,
okay.
and that's why he has no place in.
And now being told I legally
today.
now have to say COVID is a thing, and Tom Tugendhat is not in bed with that spy. Well, that's it.
Well, he did. He let the guy in.
Just make sure there's no beds involved, and we'll probably get away with it.
All right, I apologise. I didn't mean it that way.
That's it for part two. But coming up, they're coming for birds, they're coming for women and Scottish people. But we might say nothing. Find out in a few minutes.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy the weekend, although the rather damp end for many of us is setting us up for what's to come during the new working week. Even into the end of Sunday, some heavy thunderstorms possible across parts of southeast England, torrential downpours, so do just take care if you are travelling there overnight. Elsewhere, the rain will be turning more persistent and heavy as well for western Scotland, parts of northwest England. Underneath all the cloud around for many of us, it will be rather warm, temperatures holding up around 12 to 17 degrees Celsius. So a very mild start to Monday morning, and this band of rain in the west will gradually push its way over towards the east, scooping up some of the thunderstorms as well, clearing them off out into the North Sea. Rain will be most persistent for parts of northeast Scotland, but behind that there will be some brighter intervals developing, still with a scattering of rather sharp showers to watch out for though. Temperatures ranging between 14 and 21 degrees Celsius. As we head into the middle part of the week, another area of low pressure is hot on its heels and wanting to move its way in. So blustery winds developing for a good chunk of Wales, England and Northern Ireland, coastal gales in places. And it will be bringing this band of rain initially across Northern Ireland at dawn on Tuesday, but increasingly spreading its way eastwards. Generally, northwest England, Wales seeing the brunt of the rainfall, far south and far north, perhaps seeing some drier intervals in places, but still catching some of that rainfall. Further showers as we head throughout Wednesday, Thursday and Friday as well. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, then straight into The Guardian. Paul, Scotland may have found a way to reduce their life expectancy even further.
Good point. Majority of Scottish voters support assisted dying bill, poll reports. Of course they do. They live in Scotland under the SNP. So I'd want to die if I was in Scotland right now. However, it's all about the devil's in the detail about this sort of stuff. Assisted dying, it didn't come around just because people want to die earlier. It came about because people, you know, modern medicine's got us to a point that we can diagnose now when people are going to die with terminal illnesses, that we can tell them it's not going to be particularly pleasant. And, you know, perhaps it's a good idea. Perhaps it's a very personal choice, and in that situation, you want to take yourself off somewhere, you want to have a little bit of a party with your friends, and you want to say goodbye. Where it gets tricky is like it has done in Canada, where there are people who have had a couple of sad days, and then they go for advice, and they're told, have you considered this as an option, which is topping yourself off? And that's when it's not good, you know. So I think the reason that so many people, and there were 651 people polled, I can understand. I'd imagine if we were all told we were going to die sometime soon of some terrible illness, we'd look for a way out as well, maybe to try and avoid it. So I can understand why they voted for it, but the detail's in the devil.
I got an email today telling me who was on the show, and for a second there, the devil's in the detail, but in the detail it actually says this policy, this proposal would be you need 2 doctors to verify that you are of sound mind and that the diagnosis is valid and that you are not pressured. So that kind of takes out the Canadian worry.
No, first of all, the devil isn't in the detail. This is the devil. You don't kill people. This is part of that big war between Team World that wants us dead and Team Britain or Team USA, which wants us to thrive. There's an old joke, an old Jewish joke, where a guy goes to the doctor and the doctor says to him, sir, I'm sorry to tell you, you've got a terminal illness, you've got 6 months to live. Would you mind if I ask you what you would do, what are you planning on doing in the last 6 months of your life? And the Jewish guy says, I'm going to go to another doctor and get another opinion. That's...
If we look at it, because these stories are really easy to think about killing other people, but for that, do you think about yourself? If you were in a situation where you thought you had years of suffering, would you want to have the right to do something about it when physically you might not be able to?
I would vote the way that the majority of people have done in this. I would, you know, if there is... Why suffer if you don't have to? If you're going to, you know, there are some terrible diseases out there that can... We've all been, you know, we've all been subject to it through grandparents and parents and things. I'm thinking of things like dementia or something where you just... I mean, dementia's not a good idea, actually.
You have a rich...
Because the idea... Because somebody's got to make a decision on your point. Forget I said anything.
I should point out, you did say why suffer needlessly just as they cut to your Twitter address, which I think was great. The Guardian, Lewis, and breaking news, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds can tweet.
Can tweet.
Tweet.
The Charities campaign has basically...
Wheels are coming off.
Basically, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds accused ministers of being liars for not doing things to help the environment, whatever, and those ministers happen to be Tories, and the Tories says, hey, wait a second, we're giving these people a break, we're not making them pay taxes, they shouldn't be allowed to attack us or any member of government. And so they said to the Charity Commission, you are not allowed to, you got to do something. And the Charity Commission said, no, you can, they said to the Royal, you can say whatever you want to about our government.
And do you agree with it or not?
I, on one hand, I don't believe in taxes, number one. And number two, I don't believe in tax breaks for any kind of businesses like this.
So would you agree with a charity being able to say things that might upset politicians?
The answer is yes. If you're going to give an organisation a discount, you should be allowed to say what.
At this rate, some of the things you say, you could qualify for charitable status. then you'd agree with tax breaks. Paul, your take on this?
Well, of course, I'm a free speech advocate. I don't want to see any control on speech. I think the best way for us to all make informed decisions is to hear what everybody's got to say. Yeah. And who cares about upsetting politicians? In fact, I would start a charity that deliberately upsets politicians. Why wouldn't you want to upset politicians?
Because you don't understand this, Paul, because the Team World of all these people who are like taking their money and giving it to these charities just to mess up the government. And that's what's bad. I mean, the problem is there's more and more people. I mean, let's face it, conservatives are not very generous people. But the left are willing to spend billions to the Bird Society to screw the Tories. So we should not allow them to do that.
So you think that the people are giving money to the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds to attack the Tories?
Yes.
OK.
Yeah.
I think that might not necessarily be true. There's some balance. I'm sure that's not necessarily true. Let's move on to the Express, Paul, and it's happened again. Some website has changed all women to all bodies. So now we have to say all bodies will one day break your heart.
Yeah, look, before I get into that, let me just give you the synopsis of what the Express is saying here. So woke website censors writer Sorry, let me start again. Woke website censors writer for saying that females have periods. So a writer who goes by the name of Millie Hill is outraged because her articles were adapted to take out the reference to female in her piece about periods on the website. She was writing about Always sanitary products, and obviously Always is owned by Procter & Gamble, so we'll let Lewis talk about that in a minute. But we need to park this trans debate just for a moment, because in order for us to have a debate about anything, you've got to have something to baseline from. So there has to be a baseline, and in this case, it has to be biological truth, something that we all agree on. Now, I know not everybody agrees on, but if it's scientifically proven that women menstruate, then at least we can start from that, and we can add to that. We can add the nuance to that. We can say, this happens, this is the debating baseline.
Look, again, just to be the devil's advocate here, get your Twitter thing up. What they've said isn't untrue. It's just not the most accurate way of defining it. Because if they say all bodies, well, I guess they are bodies that also menstruate. There's a far more elegant way of saying it, which is all women. But you know what I mean? You're claiming that they're saying something untrue. What they're doing is just going crazily vague.
Sorry, Lewis, I know it's your turn now. But what I'd like to say is women have fought, feminists in particular.
But to answer that, can you address that point, though? Your point is
I am actually saying that the truth is... It's a very good point, Steve, and I understand why you're saying it. But the truth is that it is only women that menstruate. And you have to be born a biological woman to be able to menstruate. Now, you can transition to become a woman at some point. A lot of people believe that. However, at no point can you transition to menstruate.
Oh, yeah, that all checks out. Procter & Gamble, Lewis. Do they make sugar?
I mean, they're evil. They're evil, basically. They come out of Cincinnati. I've never been there, but there's one of those cities in America. It scares me. It was a very religious town, Procter & Gamble. I mean, it was on the Mississippi River. I don't know what to think about it. I know what to think about it. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. Everybody's watching this. They know it's ridiculous. It's the end of the world. It's part of this global war between Team World that wants to deny, that wants to destroy the family bond, that wants to stop people from having children, that wants to murder people, okay?
How is Team UK and Team USA not within Team World? Maybe my geography is not what it was.
Well, no, because the evil empire has taken over Britain and has taken over America in a lot of places, and it needs, and we British people.
I've seen a film about that.
Need to fight back.
At some point, they do build a Death Star. The Daily Mail, Lewis, and brevity is racist now. Surely, if anything, it's sexist.
This is Harvard's woke student newspaper, which is called the Crimson, because that's the color of Harvard is crimson, and it claims that limiting applications to 200 words penalizes students from marginalized backgrounds. I didn't realize you only had to write back in the day, you had to write like thousands of word essays.
They call it an essay at 200 words.
At 200 words.
It's just a retweet or something.
And so what they're saying is they want there to be lots of words that people, when they apply, because here's the essence of it. It's not really listed in this thing. The essence of it is they're not allowed to ask people, they're not allowed to choose people based on their race, creed, religion. So what they're hoping is that if you give someone thousands of words to write, they'll put in there that, by the way, I'm a wheelchair-bound African-American trans woman who has a list.
Fewer than 200 words, you can still say that. I get the feeling if you had to write, your first 200 words would just be, I can't say it, I should say it, but I can't say it. I'm not going to say it, and you've run out of words. You never get anything across. Paul, what do you reckon? I mean, a bit of nonsense, this?
A little bit of nonsense. It's always amazing, isn't it, how they inadvertently become the most racist and bigoted, trying to avoid being so. So the language they use, things like marginalised backgrounds and non-traditional backgrounds, and I'd never heard until today trauma dumping. I understand exactly what it means as soon as I read it, which is what Lewis was talking about. But of course, this is about making things anonymised, but also at the same time trying to hit quotas, which we all know exist. So if you're going to, if by the way everybody did these 200-word essays and they accidentally just allowed white people into the university because they smashed it in 200 words, that would be a problem for the university.
I can say I actually thought trauma dumping was something very... That's it for part 3. Coming up in the next section, fake online reviews may get illegal, so I'll have to quickly write one for Lewis's calendar during the break. We'll see you shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, to the Daily Mail. Lewis, should it be illegal to be fake online? And I don't mean your Twitter account where you're called Tiffany.
Campaigners call for the posting of fake reviews online to be made a criminal offence. And should you be allowed to make... What is a fake review? What does that mean? I don't know what it means, but this woman who has had a farm, God bless her, for a farm, a ranch, whatever. Do you farm goats or do you ranch them? She got a lot of criticism because she's supposedly killing animals, and this vegan Wiltshire person said, "Hey, wait a second, we got to pile in," and the Countryside Alliance is asking that the online safety bill, which is evil, from what I know, from what I've heard Andrew Doyle talk about. They were hoping that it could be addressed through the Digital Markets and Competition and Consumers Bill. And so the answer to that question is, let people, how can you stop it?
But I mean, the pylons are a bit nasty, and I think the problem here is that online reviews means we're listening to the opinions of people online. Always a bit risky, Paul.
It can be, yeah. I mean, I disagree, because my comedy club chain, epiccomedy.co.uk, has got 1.7 million five-star reviews, Steve. So I don't...
How much did that cost?
Well, I spent several evenings doing that myself, so I don't disagree. I do disagree. There are no such thing as...
true?
No, it's got 3. And some suspicious comments
What is the name
from
of it?
absolute losers. Like Steve says, people on the internet are weird.
What is the name of it?
No, we're not going to do it again, because I think it's unfair. Epic Comedy.
The Daily Mail, Paul, and what will happen to your internet history after your death? Deleted, but it may hold clues as to why you've got that orange in your mouth.
Sorry, Steve, that just really tickled me. I don't know why, perhaps that's the way I think I'm going to go.
Relatable material.
The company that erases you online when you die. So it says it's bizarre. This bizarre site replaces your questionable browsing history with a clean slate after your death. Now, I don't know why we've got to wait till we're dead. I mean, this is a fantastic service. Why can't they... I could probably just do with this once a month, just a quick safety check of my browsing. I mean, some of the things it suggests are kind of dodgy, are, searching for pub quiz answers, which my dad, being a quiz master, would absolutely agree with, but I don't think that's dodgy. And taking a glance at X-rated content, I'm not sure that anyone just takes a glance.
If anything, I find it improves the pub quiz. Gets me through that picture, round.
I find it like it's a bit scary because it deletes it after 14 days, and I'm not worried because my internet browser is just Louis Schaefer is.
Just constantly Googling yourself.
Louis Schaefer is.
OK, let's go to the Telegraph, Lewis. And what winds baby boomers up? Is it everything?
Well, why am I giving this story? Because I guess I'm a baby boomer, right?
Yeah.
You're not a baby boomer.
No, Generation X.
I'm an actual baby boomer. I'm not going to say what year. I was born in 1957. I look amazing. I look amazing because I'm on an all-meat diet. It says, according to Boom Radio, a station aimed at those born between 1946 and 1964, it says that old people are irritated by everything. every possible thing, automated helplines, censoring songs, basically parking via smartphone. Basically, they are the GB News audience, grumpy, miserable people.
Our favourites.
So, Paul, as a Generation Xer, you read this list of these baby boomers. Does it seem totally different to what upsets you?
No, and as we discussed just before we came on air, it's very depressing because I absolutely agree with everything written in this article. I'm a Generation X, which, of course, as Steve will agree, is the best generation. And these things are annoying. Cashless parking can be annoying. Banning lyrics in records is annoying. Just leave it alone. Helplines, all annoying. Really annoying.
You need your own spin-off podcast. It's just you listing things that you find annoying. To the Daily Mail, Paul, and what's this? Musicians are poor. Who'd have thought?
Who would have thunk it, eh? A quarter of musicians, just a quarter, do not earn enough to support themselves and their families, and almost half make less than £14,000 a year. So interesting. I mean, by the way, I should say at this point, this doesn't just apply to musicians. It does in this article, but I would count all comedians within this as well. But interestingly, it says the average for those making all their money from music is £30,500 a year, which I think would still be considered is £3,000 a year less than the average salary, and about £8,000 less than the average salary if you've got a degree education. But it's £30,000 a year, and that's the average for musicians.
Does the average include like Adele and Ed Sheeran?
Well, if it
really
does,
weighing it,
then that's incredible, because there must be people on 70 pence a year. Because you imagine the average, because they're on 30 million quid a year. It's a good point, no, Steve. And it's the same within comedy. Those that are on the comedy circuit will know they earn vastly less than those that are on the telly.
Yeah.
But this is such a non-story, because who calls themselves a musician? Anybody could call themselves a musician. Of course you want to be called a musician. You make $1 as a musician. Louis Schaefer's a comedian. Am I a comedian?
That's the last time you Googled it.
Yeah.
Let's I want to get your take on this, The Guardian, Lewis. And is it safe to drink the tap water in the UK? And the answer won't surprise you.
It's not safe to drink any water anywhere unless it comes from a stream in a mountain that's totally clear. Water.
Is that what it says in the article?
It doesn't say that. I don't care what it says in the article. I'm telling you, the people, water is dehydrated.
Isn't it?
It is. It doesn't have magnesium anymore. It's completely...
Demagnesiumizing rather than dehydrating, maybe?
It's got all sorts of stuff in it that just leaches the water. Proof positive. When you wash your hands too much or you spend too much time in the bath, your skin rots away. Water is bad for you. If you're on an all-meat diet, uncooked, you do not need... Oh, my God, this is the worst show I've ever done. I want to apologize.
I feel that I now have to say COVID is a thing, Tom Tugendhat's not in bed with anyone, and water doesn't dehydrate you. Paul,
you know what? You can Google it. If people out there can Google, is water dehydrating? You will find people who say that it is.
Paul, do you drink?
I do, and it usually hydrates me. This is very much a first world problem, Steve. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You imagine if you're in a famine-stricken country and you accidentally happen upon this story, you'll be like, taps in a house and you're complaining? This is not something to complain about.
People never drank like 2 litres of water.
We've got to wrap this bad boy up, I'm afraid. The show's nearly over. Let's take another look at our Monday's front pages. The Daily Mail goes with, Letby may have murdered 3 more babies. The Guardian, Unite launches red wall push for more radical Labour policies. On the front page of the Financial Times, Labour government would seek to rewrite Brexit deal, Starmer pledges. iNews says open secret, Russell Brand broadcasters face questions over failures. The Telegraph, BBC forced into urgent inquiry over Brand. Daily Star says Britain on the lash. And those were your front pages. That's all we've got time for. Thanks to my guests, Lewis Schaefer and Paul Cox. We're back tomorrow at 11 with Simon Evans, Josh Howie and Francis Foster. And if you're watching at 5, stay tuned for the breakfast show on the way next. But till then, have a good one.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy the weekend, although the rather damp end for many of us is setting us up for what's to come during the new working week. Even into the end of Sunday, some heavy thunderstorms possible across parts of south-east England, torrential downpours, so do just take care if you are travelling there overnight. Elsewhere, the rain will be turning more persistent and heavy as well for western Scotland, parts of northwest England. Underneath all the cloud around for many of us, it will be rather warm, temperatures holding up around 12 to 17 degrees Celsius. So a very mild start to Monday morning, and this band of rain in the west will gradually push its way over towards the east, scooping up some of the thunderstorms as well, clearing them off out into the North Sea. Rain will be most persistent for parts of northeast Scotland, but behind that there will be some brighter intervals developing, still with a scattering of rather sharp showers to watch out for though. Temperatures ranging between 14 and 21 degrees Celsius. As we head into the middle part of the week, another area of low pressure is hot on its heels and wanting to move its way in. So blustery winds developing for a good chunk of Wales, England and Northern Ireland, coastal gales in places. And it will be bringing this band of rain initially across Northern Ireland at dawn on Tuesday, but increasingly spreading its way eastwards. Generally, northwest England, Wales seeing the brunt of the rainfall. Far south and far north, perhaps seeing some drier intervals in places, but still catching some of that rainfall. Further showers as we head throughout Wednesday, Thursday and Friday as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Free Speech Nation is coming right up. But first, the news with me, Ray Addison. Our top story. The Met Police says it will speak to Channel 4 and the Sunday Times after claims of rape and sexual assault were made against the comedian Russell Brand. Now, a warning for those watching on television. The following footage contains flashing images. In a statement, the force said it was aware of media reports of a series of allegations and urged anyone who believes they've been the victim of a sexual assault to get in touch. It comes as the BBC, Channel 4 and a production company behind shows hosted by Brand in the mid-2000s launched their own urgent reviews. Russell Brand denies any criminality and insists all of his relationships have been consensual. Claims that Labour wants the UK to join the EU's migrant quota scheme are complete garbage, Sir Keir Starmer says. The Labour leader had indicated he'd be open to working with Brussels on managing channel crossings, which may involve taking in some asylum seekers. But Sir Keir says that would be as part of a deal to return channel migrants. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says Labour's approach would mean 100,000 more illegal migrants in Britain each year. Liz Truss will claim that Rishi Sunak's government has spent £35 billion more than she would have done. Speaking at the Institute for Government, the former PM will defend her time in charge nearly a year after the mini-budget that led to her resignation. According to The Telegraph, Ms Truss will claim that under her plans, £18.4 billion would have been saved this year and next. Wales has become the first country in the UK to introduce a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for residential roads. The Welsh Government says cutting the limit from 30 will protect lives and save the Welsh NHS £92 million a year. The Welsh Tories say the decision will slow down emergency services and negatively impact people's livelihoods. And the Met Office says more than a month's rain could fall by the end of today. A yellow warning is in place across southwest England and Wales. Meanwhile, an amber weather warning for thunderstorms was in place across parts of Devon and Somerset. That's now ended, although severe flash flooding was reported in the Devon towns of Dawlish and Kenton, and flights have been cancelled at Exeter Airport. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now it's time to go back to Free Speech Nation.
An Antiques Roadshow participant gets quizzed on reparations, the Welsh Government wants everyone to drive slowly, and the BBC refuses to play Roisin Murphy's songs, but does play a song including the phrase "kick turfs." This is Free Speech Nation. It's Sunday night. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course, we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors. You name it, they will try to cancel it. Coming up on the show tonight, under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, Canada is often seen as a successful example of progressive policies in action. But is that really the case? We're going to meet one of the makers of a new documentary about the country. Are we too quick to steer sufferers of gender dysphoria towards reassignment surgery? We'll be talking to someone who has transitioned about their particular experience. And we're going to get the latest news from Ireland, where the Justice Minister says she hopes to have controversial hate crime legislation passed by the end of the year. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our rather beautiful studio audience. And my guests this evening are Leo Kearse and Jonathan Cogan. How are you both?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Looking dapper as ever. You always surprise me with the imagination of your shirts.
Yeah, TK Maxx is a wonderland.
You shouldn't have confessed to that. You should have said Armani. I wouldn't have known the difference. How are you?
I think my shirt's a bit small. I left it in the airing cupboard for maybe 8 weeks and now it's kind of shrunk a little bit.
Is that your excuse?
It is my excuse. I think I've just put on a bit of weight.
A little bit.
Honest. Yeah. I stopped keto.
It's fine. You're
no
festively plump. Now, we're going to get some questions from our studio audience. Our first question from Paul. Where is Paul? Hi, Paul.
Should celebrities be named when there is an allegation of a sexual offence?
Now, of course, this has been the big news this week, that Russell Brand has been accused of sexual assaults and emotional abuse. This was a joint investigation by the Sunday Times, The Times and Channel 4's Dispatches. Russell Brand strongly denies all these allegations and, in fact, performed last night at Wembley, went ahead with it. Leo, anonymity. What would be the best way to handle this kind of thing? What do you think?
I don't think celebrities should have anonymity because with anonymity we wouldn't have this media circus. And my job depends on whipped up into a furore over some prurience over a celebrity's sex life.
So for purely selfish reasons, it's important that they don't
absolutely,
get it. Right,
absolutely.
okay.
But I think due process has to be followed, and you know, it doesn't feel like Russell Brand has been treated fairly in this case. They spent over a year building the case. He had 8 days to respond. That's not fair. I think if it went through a court system, it'd be much fairer. And I think the documentary in this case has actually helped Russell Brand. There are all these rumours swirling around him, and then this documentary laid, you know, all these cases out. And I mean, there's definitely some unsavoury stuff in there. You know, possibly
there's allegations of criminality.
Yes, possibly some criminality. But you know, without having those allegations tested in court, we just don't know.
So it's tricky.
So this is really sort of dispelled. The mist is lifted, and I think Russell Brand. A lot of people are saying, well, he's hardly Savile, isn't he?
But it's tricky, isn't it? Because ultimately, when it comes to allegations of rape and sexual assault, they're underreported, they're under-prosecuted. So unless you have a situation where people are named, then other people are less likely to come forward. What do you think, Jonathan?
So you think it sets a precedent for people feeling confident to come forward and make those allegations when they feel they need to?
Which they couldn't do if it wasn't an anonymous. If the anonymous.
So it only works in the case of a celebrity.
Well, yes, I suppose so.
OK, well, I guess that isn't necessarily a microcosm for everything else. But can you imagine... So he was actually on stage playing Wembley when that documentary was on at the same time. Can you imagine the heckles that night? Well, it's been absolutely brutal.
Well, I don't think it was the case, actually. I think the audience were very supportive.
The Team Russell.
But it's very interesting, isn't it, this whole thing? Because I've known someone who was falsely accused as well and completely destroyed his life. So it's really difficult. I think what you're saying about due process is right. So however emotive, however sensitive and obviously, if someone has committed these horrendous acts, they should be prosecuted. They should go to...
Yeah, I'm watching the documentary. I mean, some of the stuff was coming out. I was like, you know, oh, listen to the music. He's evil. Look, she's describing his eyes, devil eyes. But then my wife was saying, because she's a barrister, she's prosecuted and defended sexual assault cases. That's not how we met. But but she was saying, you know, like if that was tested, that could be picked apart in court. That could be shown to have a different meaning. And so this is why due process is so important.
And trial by social media is never
it's never good. That's absolutely true. Well, let's get another question now. This one from Amy. Amy, hello.
Hi, I was at a Sex Matters event with Maya Forstater and Helen Joyce in Manchester last Sunday, and we got abuse from trans activists as we left. Should a woman be able to listen to a talk about sex and the law without being abused?
Well, I think the obvious answer is yes. I mean, I saw that footage, Amy. So that was when Helen Joyce and Maya started walking through, people screaming F Helen Joyce and things like this. I mean, you were there. So can I ask you what your experience of that was?
So this wasn't an activist event. It was just a bunch of women thinking they were just going to listen to people that they were interested in talking about their perspectives on the law.
Yes.
As we left, we were told we had to go out the back door and the police would meet us, which
it seemed
came as a bit of a surprise.
Well, it is surprising for people just gathering to talk, isn't it?
And then we walked down the street and they were, like, literally, like, on my back. They were screaming mostly directed at Maya and Helen, but
Yes.
it was directed to all of us. My friend's name was mentioned. It was quite intimidating.
Yeah.
It got personal, lots of, obviously, personal abuse directed at us, just for going to a talk about what the law on sex and gender was and how it was changing on a Sunday morning.
This is something we've talked about a lot on the show, because something I've noticed, and a lot of my guests have noticed, is that there is real violence among the rhetoric of militant trans activists. Death threats are very common, rape threats, that kind of thing. Whereas, what most people in a civilised society, democratic society, want to do is sit down and talk about issues that when there's conflicts of interest. Why, Jonathan, do you think this is the case? That it's always the case that these activists jump to violence or jump to threats?
Is it because they don't believe in their argument, so they have to threaten violence? I mean,
is it that they don't believe, or that the arguments don't withstand scrutiny? Because I always think that violence is kind of last resort for someone who's run out of an argument.
Yeah, if you're sort of having a insult match with somebody and you throw a punch, you've lost. You've lost the argument. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not imagining this, am I? Like signs saying "decapitate TERFs."
Yeah.
I mean, if that was at a women's rights march or a gay rights march, people would say, "Take that down. What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, and also if you're trying to convince everyone that you really are a woman. And I thought rape threats and violent threats, I mean, they're not a traditionally feminine form of self-expression.
No, that is a particularly
It's almost
odd one,
as if
isn't
you're
it?
just a bloke in a frock who's dead angry.
Almost as if. But it does seem as though this is, well, I think, Amy, they're not persuading anyone of their cause. I think that's the thing. So ultimately,
you're certainly not going to win over anybody on the fence.
You're not going to, are you?
Yeah.
So ultimately, those who retain the moral high ground and are willing to have discussions, hopefully, those are the people who are going to be most effective. Anyway, we're going to move on to another question. We've got a question from Anna. Hi, Anna. Hello.
Should the BBC be playing songs which condone violence against women?
This is really interesting because, Roisin Murphy, as we all know, has come under fire, and in fact her record label stopped promoting her new album, Hit Parade, hasn't stopped it selling incredibly well. All that Roisin Murphy said was that she had concerns about puberty blockers and putting messed up kids on puberty blockers. Perfectly reasonable view that is in fact backed up by the Cass report, the fact that the NHS has said, we're not going to use these drugs except it's clinical trials. So a completely mainstream view has had the industry attack her, activists go mad. The BBC pulled an entire sort of section on her work, including playing her songs. But they did play a song by a band called Dream Nails. The song was called They Them. And one of the lyrics is, kick TERFs all day, don't break a sweat. Double standards. What do you think?
I mean, absolute double standards. I would say, from the artistic perspective, you should be able to write a song about whatever you want. You can have, Johnny Cash having a song about shooting somebody.
Yes.
And at the same time, the sentiment behind it almost seems like it is trying to cross over into mainstream politics. Like we were talking about earlier, there is this threat of people who want to discuss alternate ideas.
Well, it's the casual thing, like kick TERFs, that kind of rhetoric is so common and so casual.
Yeah.
But this is, I take your point about artistic freedom. I think, Leo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of think that if you are an artist and you do sort of edgy stuff, like when the Jamaican dancehall artists used to do stuff about killing gay people in their songs, I think you are free to do that. But as soon as you do that, you kind of exclude yourself from mainstream. You're not a mainstream artist anymore, and you can't complain if you're not played on Radio 1, right?
But the BBC are telling us what the mainstream is now. So the BBC is the mainstream, and they're saying no. So if you're a woman with perfectly normal, rational views, being concerned about children, being concerned about the medicalisation or sterilisation of children, then that's not allowed. But the mainstream now is misogynist violence, and that's to be encouraged.
That is a very strange development, but it's true. And the BBC, they weren't playing things on Radio 1 from some of those Jamaican songs calling for the deaths of gay people. They weren't doing that. They were saying, no, there's a red line there.
Yeah.
But they are OK with a song that says violence against women is fine. So there is, I mean, it just
Did they play the Prodigy song, Smack My Up?
They did, but I think they bleeped it. If I remember rightly, I think they bleeped it.
Smack My Dog Up? What was it?
Well, let's not say explicitly what it was.
Okay.
But yeah, no, but again, artistic freedom, absolutely.
Sure.
And this band, Dream Nails, whoever they are, they can sing about whatever they want. But it just seems weird to me that a mainstream radio station would then say, it's fine to play that, but it's not fine to play a sort of acclaimed, successful artist who happens to raise legitimate concerns about puberty block. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And art is supposed to be about, you know, self-expression, not censoring yourself. And, you know, Roisin Murphy, even though she didn't put it on her album or anything, it was on her personal Facebook page.
Yeah, it was a private Facebook page. It wasn't even. It's not like she wanted a big public debate about
Which means
it.
she's got a snake. One of her friends is a snake.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. OK, well, we've got a question from via email now. Came in from Amelia. Hello, Amelia. Amelia says, do universities employ enough staff to protect free speech? Now, I saw this article too. I was kind of amazed by this because you know that there have been all this legislation going through in terms of universities have to adhere to freedom of speech regulations now. And there's been this study that showed that only 2 out of 43 top universities employ any staff at all to deal with freedom of speech. That's 5 members of staff in total. However, according to Alumni for Free Speech, which is a campaigning group, 515 staff are employed to deal with equality, diversity and inclusion issues. And what I find often with equality and inclusion, it's incompatible with free speech, actually, because you can't have those departments because they're all about censorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you hear those words, like equality is always about, you know, suppressing certain groups and elevating other groups, and inclusion is always about excluding people, and diversity is always about having just one acceptable bandwidth of opinion. It's a nonsense. The whole thing is a tax, and I think it's going to end up costing universities and costing culture and society and corporations a huge amount to keep running these departments, because all they do is get in the way of the sort of efficient running of...
They do, and also the terms that they use are the opposite of what they mean. So when they talk about diversity, they mean homogeneity. They mean everyone thinking exactly the same way. So like Peter Boghossian makes this point about if you have a panel, but you have a black conservative, that's not diverse, because he's got the wrong opinions.
Right.
So what they want is everyone to have the right, the very narrow, correct opinions.
Just in a different outfit.
Yeah, basically, exactly. So what do you think about this? Should they be focusing more on free speech on
I'm interested how they maintain it. So surely free speech is just having a place where people can talk, or is it security they need? What is it? Free speech is almost the default, right? It's just...
Well, no, but the problem in universities is they have, unions in particular, have a no platforming policy.
Yes.
And what they do is they often say, you know, you can't have this person turning up because the security costs will be too high.
Yes, okay.
That's the normal excuse that they use.
Disincentivize it by that, right?
Well, what they should be doing... I mean, when I gave a talk at Gonville and Caius College in Cambridge, the week before, Helen Joyce had given a talk at the same college in the same room, and there were people outside screaming, banging drums. They had to sneak students in who wanted to go and watch the talk.
Jordan Peterson said he started doing his talks early in the morning because none of the protesters turned up at that time.
I think that's the way to do it. They'll never get up before midday, so just do morning events.
But then you're not going to get people at the talk either, watching.
No, that's true, exactly. But still, it would get rid of the activists. We've got one more question now in from email. This is from Kay, and Kay says, should you avoid prison if you've switched gender since committing a crime? Now, that sounds
from
like
Nicola Sturgeon.
No, this sounds... Wait for it, Jonathan.
Sorry.
It sounds like a joke. It's actually... this has happened in Spain this week. So a convicted sex offender was prosecuted and has now said, since the prosecution, that he's going to register as a woman, and that means he's a new person now. So the crime doesn't count anymore, and it can start from scratch. Do you think that's convincing?
No, I mean, that's like, I don't know, changing your horoscope or something. I don't know, you probably can't change your horoscope. That's the world we live in. You can't change your horoscope, but you can change your gender.
You can. I identify as a Sagittarius. Is that allowed?
But yeah, I think this is, and it's quite insulting to, I mean, I say quite insulting, it's massively insulting to his 2 victims who said, you know, he's just doing this to get out of you know, paying for his crimes.
But even if they transition gender, they're still the same person, just with a different gender, according to the whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could take this seriously, but the fact that it's been raised as a possibility...
You can't run from police in high heels.
That's true,
But there's an argument there, isn't it? I mean, isn't it true that... Someone told me this, I'm not a scientist, but apparently every 7 years or so, every single cell of your body has been regenerated, so you are technically a new person. So anything I did more than 7 years ago is fine.
Was that somebody in HMP Broadmarsh that said that?
It was, actually, yeah, that's true. But there's an argument there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, personal identity doesn't exist in any meaningful sense. It's all just one big cosmic thought. But that's probably for another show.
That's definitely for another show. That's far too profound.
Yeah, the edible kicked in.
What are you thinking?
Yeah.
Not that kind of show. show. OK, so next on Free Speech Nation, is Canada really the utopia of progressive politics that it's sometimes portrayed as? I'm going to meet one of the co-makers of a fascinating documentary about the country, and it's been viewed over 2 million times already. See you in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, nah, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Since Justin Trudeau began his tenure as Prime Minister of Canada in 2015, the country has been seen by many as one to be admired throughout the world, a safe haven where progressive liberal politics have created an apparent democratic utopia. But is that really the case? A documentary made by The Telegraph, which examines Canada and its approach to issues such as gender ideology, the legalisation of drugs and laws on suicide, has already been viewed over 4 million times. Let's take a look.
Canada was a very stable, middle-class country with reliable institutions. To say that's gone is to say almost nothing.
Canada. Under Justin Trudeau, the former British colony has sought to position itself as the global bastion of progressive politics.
We have become a totalitarian state.
So the documentary is called Canada's Woke Nightmare, A Warning to the West. It was made by Stephen Edgington and Alexander McCarran. And Stephen joins me now. Welcome to the show. So, congratulations on the documentary. Over 4 million views already. How long has it been out?
About 2 weeks.
That's not bad going.
Not bad.
That's pretty good. Now, I noticed Jordan Peterson there talking about how Canada has fallen. I've spoken to him about that very topic as well. It feels as though this has all happened very, very quickly. What are the worst aspects that you have uncovered while working on the film?
Well, as you mentioned, we looked into a variety of different issues facing Canada in recent years, and you could go back decades, and if you want, we can talk about the history of where this all comes from as well. But
yes,
in particular, the worst things that are facing Canada at the moment are they've legalised hard drugs in places like Vancouver. So we went to Vancouver, and they've legalised heroin, cocaine, fentanyl in small doses if you sort of possess them.
Yes.
And there's a huge amount of rise in homelessness and violent crime. If you walk around the streets of Vancouver, you'll see huge amounts of sort of homeless encampments and things like that, similar to going to places like San Francisco or Seattle in America.
So it's almost like a test case, because people who are for the sort of complete legalisation of drugs will say that you would have a kind of situation where it would be kind of, the gangsters would be out of the picture, it would be more moderate, it would work.
Well,
it doesn't work.
They've seen a huge rise, as I say, in violent crime and homelessness and in drug overdoses. And what you have is these huge NGOs will go to Vancouver and they'll make vast amount of money trying to supposedly help these people, but in fact they're sort of affirming their drug addiction by handing out needles and handing out money to these people. So there's a huge problem.
So a lot of people will say, and I've noted, that the Canada's government has effectively been kind of captured by an ideology, or at least is trying to promote a particular ideology. And this has particular ramifications for free speech, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and you can see there's so many different cases, and we explored some of those cases of individuals who are facing losing their jobs and livelihoods because they support certain political positions. So I'll give you an example. We spoke to a nurse called Amy Ham, who has been a nurse for over 10 years. She's never had any complaints against her until recently. She was supporting J.K. Rowling. She put up, or was involved in, a sort of billboard that said, "I heart J.K. Rowling," and she's a kind of
quite a positive message, you would have thought.
And obviously she's a gender-critical person. She's written blogs and things like this about it.
Yes.
And 2 members of the public complained to her nursing board in British Columbia, and now she faces losing her nursing licence. So she's a single mother with 2 children, and she's facing losing her entire livelihood because of her political beliefs, which I think are shared by many people, probably in Canada and around the world.
And we hear that kind of thing happening over here every now and then. Thankfully, we've got groups like the Free Speech Union who step in and normally resolve these matters. But in Canada, it's coming from the government itself. That's the difference here, isn't it?
Well, in Canada, the opposition party, the Conservative Party, has been fairly weak on lots of these issues, particularly on trans rights and gender ideology. So the Conservatives here, at least some of the ministers may say some platitudes or have some rhetoric in support of gender-critical beliefs. But in Canada, the Conservative Party has really been weak on this issue. Their new leader, Pierre Poilievre, has really tried to avoid this issue at all costs. I think all Conservative MPs in the Canadian Parliament voted for a law which would stop... we had a similar thing here in the UK where there was this idea that conversion therapy against transgender people, this sort of stopping conversion therapy. So all the Conservatives voted in favour of that law, C4, I think it was called.
Yes.
So there's a huge problem in Canada where, you know, even those on the right supposedly have not been defending the free speech rights, etc.
Well, this is something that I've often argued, is that I don't think this is about the culture war generally, it's about left and right. I mean, over in this country, it was Theresa May who was pushing through the gender recognition reform. It's as though people don't fully understand the issues. When we come to conversion therapy, they say they want to ban trans conversion therapy. What they are banning there is any kind of therapeutic investigation into someone, a child particularly, who may suffer from gender dysphoria. Most of those kids will grow up to be gay, so actually to ban trans conversion therapy is to, in effect, implement gay conversion therapy. But this isn't understood.
No, and I think that this idea that gender ideology is being pushed on kids is also a huge issue in Canada.
Right.
One of the people that we spoke to in this documentary, his child, 8-year-old child, had been told that he should dress up in the opposite gender's clothing in a sort of school day for the next day. And this chap was from an Indian background, an ethnic minority in Canada. And we spoke to him and his family, and they were very socially conservative on this issue. They were, you know, quite unhappy with this, and he took his child out of the school for that day. And he told us, they like talking about my Indian background when it's South Asian Heritage Month. They want me to cook my traditional meals, the curries and things like that. But when it comes to my fundamental beliefs about God and religion and my socially conservative beliefs, they're not interested. And the school really sort of ostracised him when he refused to allow his child to do that.
It's very interesting that that kind of thing's happening. I remember back when Jordan Peterson first addressed this issue of Bill C-16 about, you know, whether he should refer to students by their preferred pronouns. His issue wasn't the issue of politeness. Like he said, he would be fine about doing that. It was the fact that there was now legislation compelling people to do so. And it turns out he was right, because you're getting compelled speech now, aren't you?
Absolutely, and there's also a law, and if we're talking about free speech in Canada, that the Justice Minister is interested in proposing, and this is around the issue of the Indigenous genocide in Canada. Now, this is a very complicated issue, but I'll just explain it very briefly if you'd like.
Of course.
Because it does link in with the free speech. In Canada, the politicians like Justin Trudeau claim that there has been a genocide against the Indigenous